Professor Javed Iqbal with us for the Institute lecture today. And before starting, I will request Professor Kankan Bhattacharya to offer a bouquet to Professor Iqbal to welcome him. Thank you. So, a brief introduction about Professor Iqbal. Professor Iqbal graduated from Delhi University, following which he worked at SERC postdoctoral fellow in the group of Professor Ian Planning in the Cambridge University. Subsequently, he moved to Oxford University as a postdoctoral fellow with Professor Sir J.E. Baldwin, and then as a visiting fellow at the University of Montpellier, France. He was a professor of chemistry at the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and he has also served as a director of the Regional Research Laboratory, Trivandrum, and as a visiting professor at the University of Notre Dame, USA, as well as at the University of Okayama, Japan, and has also taught chemistry at the New Mexico State University in USA. He was William Evans Fellow at the University of Otago, New Zealand in 2016, and he has also been awarded a visiting professorship position to teach medicinal chemistry and drug discovery at the University of Regensburg, Germany during May 2019. In the year 2000, Professor Iqbal switched to industry and moved to Dr. Reddy's laboratory, where he served as a senior vice president, distinguished research scientist, and global head of discovery chemistry until 2007. Three of the drugs discovered by his group underwent phase 1 clinical trials in Canada and Ireland. He has published more than 200 research papers and has filed 105 patents in his area of research. His current research interests include medicinal and process chemistry and chemical biology. He has mentored a number of research students, including 35 doctoral and postdoctoral fellows. Professor Iqbal is a fellow of Indian Academy of Science, Bangalore, and Indian National Science Academy, New Delhi. He is also a member of several reputed committees, including IUPAC as well as RCAP. He has served as a founder director of Dr. Reddy's Institute of Life Sciences in Hyderabad during 2007 to 2014. He is currently a founder and chairman of Cosmic Discoveries, Hyderabad. With this introduction, I request Professor Iqbal to come here and deliver today's Institute lecture. Thank you.
For an elaborate introduction, I must thank Professor and Amjad for inviting me here. And I think it has always been a pleasure to come here because this is my 4th or 5th visit to IISER Mohali. IISER Bhopal. Sorry, I've been several times to Mohali as well. Now, what I'm going to talk about today, actually, in a general talk, it is very difficult to really choose a topic and then try and justify that. And more so because you're not really talking about your own research or achievements, you're talking about something which has already been written somewhere, and I have simply put from different places and put them together. Now, what I'm going to talk today is actually, I worked, I was a member of an organization called International Council of Science, which is one of the oldest body in the world. And I was India's representative, and I happened to be their program lead in the area of urban health and well-being. So over a period of 8 years, we have interacted and traveled across Asia and Pacific, meeting a lot of people, gathering information, talking to them about general, global problems of pollution, health, urban development and all. So what I'm going to talk about today actually is a collective effort of people at ICSU, and I thought I would talk about it because this was a report prepared over a period of 7 to 8 years, and this would actually be more useful to a general audience like you. And of course, I have sort of focused on one of the pressing need of the world today is sustainability. Whether you do science or you do engineering or you do any kind of thing, sustainability becomes a very major challenge to humankind today. So let me first give you a little introduction about ICSU. It's a body which is not for profit, strengthening international science for benefit of society. It's a long history, founded in 1931. It has 107 national members, 29 scientific unions, establishes interdisciplinary bodies, sponsors programs in key areas, and of course, it does not get a lot of funding, but it uses a very unique network of worldwide scientists and intellectual sources. So it's really a body which basically influences through the policy with the different governments of the region across the world. Its vision is a word where science is used for benefit of all. Excellence in science is valued, and science knowledge is effectively linked to policy making. And of course, there's nothing but it talks about equitable access and distribution of scientific data across the world, and look into various aspects of science and how science can be practiced in the view of sustainability as one of the challenges. Now, I'm going to talk about first focus on sustainability, and I'm going to discuss about unfettered march of science, rejuvenating science as a new age, science and society for cohabitation, and imperatives of policy in an asymmetric world, and science as a word system in the international domain. So basically, in the ICSU, what we talked about is to look into various aspects, visit some of these regions and talk to people, understand their problems, and try and understand how best you can put before as a report which can influence the policies of the local governments. And since I was part of Asia and Pacific, so we only confine ourselves to the regions of this and sort of prepared a report which I'm going to present before you in terms of sustainability. So it's nothing but it's a panacea for everything, and if you look into, what is this going on? So one of the first question is the question of existentialism. How do we exist? And of course, what goes around comes around, the humankind, the environmental crisis, and the future of life on Earth. Or in other words, we can say, how do we want to die? This is a question that is being posed today, and there's a lot of challenge to humankind and human existence. So how will we go and when? So since microbes began pumping oxygen in Earth's atmosphere, in the Archaean humans are the only other group of organisms that has so profoundly affected the Earth's conditions. Like we humans actually have a very important role to play in whatever happens to the Earth, apart from the bacteria. And of course, scientists are becoming increasingly concerned that our consumption of resources, disregard for the consequences of this consumption, will bring an end to age of humans. People are talking about sustainability, whatever we're consuming, are we going to be sustained for a long time? And if not, is that going to be the end of humans? And of course, more seriously, people say, it's too small here. Now, for instance, there are other suggestions that the human might be wiped out in a more spectacular way by natural events over which we have no control. So there are these kind of fear that has been expressed all over among scientific community about the existence of humans in the way we are leading our lives today. Now, there are certain events on which we have control, for that matter, a bacterial or viral pandemic. Within the last century, humans have witnessed 4 major flu epidemics, plus HIV and SARS. And the latest is HIV, avian flu virus. And of course, the development of viral vaccines is far behind or is barely ahead of major viral mutation, because the kind of mutation that we are seeing, overuse of antibiotics, actually is going to give us a tremendous amount of challenge in terms of our own survival, because the viral mutation leads to mutations which are actually not, there's no drug for them, let's put it that way. And that's one of the very, very serious concerns, especially in TB, in many other diseases where there are virulent species or microorganisms for which we have no control. And that's why you see the kind of death you see all over the world without any cure. Now, pandemic is in World War III. In 1918, you see the flu outbreak killed more people than they were killed in World War I. And such pandemics are likely to, although exterminate humans, but could considerably reduce the number of people. So you can see the pandemic can come suddenly where you have no control. There is no medicine, no vaccine for that. Now, we all know what is the effect of global warming, melting of polar ice, which rises the sea level. Now, sea level rising is going to be a major challenge because countries like Bangladesh would completely be wiped off. So, where would these people go? In fact, there will be a transmigration of population across the globe. And that's going to create any geopolitical problems. Now, these are some of the real challenges that we need to face as human beings, and we still do not have an answer for that. Similarly, unstable weather patterns, where there's a contrast difference between polar and between tropical regions. These are all happening because of melting of ice. And of course, we lose a lot of productive agricultural land and due to the desertification, because deserts are being formed in those cultivable lands because of change in the way the climate is happening, and therefore we're going to lose a lot of land for our own cultivation, for our own food. Now, climate change also causes some very, very potential secondary effects. For instance, melting of frozen methane hydrates in permafrost. Methane is more potent than carbon dioxide and greenhouse gas. It leads to further warming. Similarly, if you look into the effect of ocean currents that has been shutting off major currents, the transfer heat from the tropics to the polar areas leading to cooling of temperature regions also causes the overheating or heating of the globe. The other thing is that overpopulation and competition for resources. If you look into consumption of calories per capita, you see North America, Europe, and Central Asia top the list. The world average is here, and Africa is even lower. So the biggest potential problem lies in the inequality in resource use. So there's a lot of fight between the inequality towards the resources that we have at our disposal. And this is going to be a major challenge for the planet. Supply and demand is one of the major things. You can see that there are almost around 2 trillion barrels that we produce, and we've already consumed half of it. And of course, it will last for another 40 years. And it is generally seen that from 1986, where we used 54 million barrels per day, now it's come to 82 million barrels today. So look at the kind of competition and the stress we have on our resources. And more so, if you look into the fighting over resources, Saudi Arabia produces more oil, refined oil, than uses, whereas America, the big brother, uses more and produces less. So you can see there's going to be a tremendous fight over the resources that we have at our disposal on this planet. There are some people are going to have more without producing much, and some are producing more but using less. So these are real questions that we need to look into. And then comes the question of sustainability. Obviously, today, sustainability has become a very major challenge to humankind. What is it? Let's first understand the definition of sustainability. Is a development that meets the need of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It's people, planet, profit. Sustainability is the intersection of these three concepts. We need to understand that people, planet, and profit have to go together and have to form a kind of network which cannot be seen in isolation to maintain a very good level of sustainability for our planet. And there are more definitions that have come about. The three-component sustainability, whereas environment, maintaining the Earth's ecosystem like eco-services such as pollution and filtering, social, maintaining community, capacity that fosters effective participation and equitable treatment of all stakeholders, economic, maintaining an economic system that provides a non-declining standard of living for this and future generations. So these are three very interrelated kind of, systems that must be looked into very carefully to basically bring about a clear degree of sustainability. And a society is nothing but sustainable societies, environment, economy, and social to give sustainable society. This is all kind of things that already been talked about across the world by different certified organizations. Now, there are three different views generally are prevalent in today's world. The environmentalist view is that it's the environment first. then comes the social, the society, and then comes the money, the economy. Whereas the humanist view is a social or society first, then comes economy, and then comes environment. And the business world view is economy first, and then you have society, and then of course finally you have environment. Now look into these. Which are these world views one has to really look into and see what best defines the so-called sustainability? Every three different views are there towards the kind of what we call it sustainability. But there are two major evolving theories of sustainability that one has to keep in mind as a scientist. It basically says emphasize links between environment, society, and economy. In a scientific model which is called ideal, the three circles that we saw previously use systems approach to incorporate linkages, which is dependencies and feedback effects between all three spheres. So you need to have a systems approach to bring about all three together to have a meaningful, sustainable approach. Now, if you look into natural systems, they're diverse and complex. And, they're evolving and adapting. You cannot ignore these systems. You see, normally what people say that we have no feeling for such systems. We think, they just exist in isolation. But actually they don't. They are very much part of our living system. They are very much related to us. And if you look into them, the integrity of the nature of all these things that you see in front of you, actually they are key to resilience. They have to be together. They have to be looked into in totality. They cannot be in isolation, and therefore their integrity is very important for the resilience. Similarly, if you look at social systems, the social system is very diverse. If you look into here the pictures, but today, as you know, we all look at who's they, the Asians, the Africans, the Americans, and we all have all kind of views about each other. But again, it's very important for us to look into the diversity, and this diversity has to be maintained, and the integrity and diversity is the key. So they cannot be looked into isolation. They are part of this global network, or they're part of this planet. And therefore, there has to be sustainability also among them, and their diversity has to be maintained. And of course, they have to be also allowed to evolve and adapt. You see, many of these people, and since you know what I'm talking about here is the people who live, the natives who lived on this earth for centuries and billions of years, actually we need to allow them to be allowed, evolve and adapt. Because there are all these countries where you have these natives. We look upon them and say, look, these are people not required. But actually, if you look into that, they are the ones who actually survived much before many of us came to the planet. And of course, there's changing world. And in changing world, they have to be looked into a kind of totality. You cannot simply say, well, this man only can live here and that man can only live there, or this person cannot live in this highly advanced place and the other person can live only in jungle. I think that the concept has to undergo a change. And that's where I think we need to look into as also aspect of sustainability, the social and economic aspect of that. Now, when we were working at ICSU, there was a very major program, as you know, Rio Plus 20. 20 years ago, in 2092, I think, Rio, the capital of Brazil, decided that we need to look into the future of Earth. And they decided to again come back after 20 years. So all the countries who were major countries who were members to Rio Plus 20 declaration, in, I think, 2012, they actually took a resolution, which I'm not going to talk about, it's a huge resolution, but they talked about what is the future for Earth? Because Earth is going to be under tremendous pressure. And how do we look and address in totality? And of course, then future Earth actually was a term coined, and then basically there are three major things that I'm going to talk about: to build and connect global knowledge, a science and technology network platform, to intensify and impact of research, which is an interdisciplinary research network, and to find new ways to accelerate sustainable development is to support the decision-making process and societal transformation. These are the three major things of future Earth that has been sort of accepted globally to look into as to what we can do about future Earth. Now, the dawn of knowledge era. See, if you look into this, the era that we are living in is actually, there is tremendous spectacular development in science and technology, and there is unparalleled economic growth if you look in the last 15, 20 years. And of course, it's all globalization, it's all globalization, competition, innovation, uncontrolled exploitation of Earth's resources. So the 21st century will be a century of knowledge. The process of transition is already on. What is the role of science and technology in this era? And that's very important to understand. In this 20th century, unprecedented gains in advancing human development, industrial growth, and eradication of poverty in certain regions of the world basically came from technological breakthrough and advancement. There's no doubt about it. And therefore, the 21st century, this role needs to be recalibrated. Because what we've done is we have gone ahead, did a lot of advancement, made life comfortable economically, socially, and unprecedented growth of science and technology in 21st century has to be looked into, has to be recalibrated, and I'll qualify my statement later on. Why? The progress in science has been for most part insular, monolithic, and unitary. We just science in our own way, whatever we wanted to do. We sat in an ivory tower and we decided what we want to do. Scientists normally have this view of creating a comfort zone around them. They do things where they think they are very comfortable. They hardly look into the problems that really need attention, especially society and people around you. And of course, at a very, very unprecedented pace, this development took place. It's grown exponentially at a rate of about 7%. This is a data that I've taken from somewhere. Doubling every 10-15 years, growing by a factor of 10 at every half century, and by a factor of close to a million in the past 300 years. And this is the data that has been already published. And look at the comparison. Societal evolution domain is 10,000 years old, and in the past 300 years we have done all this. So look at the disparity between the two, the society and the science development of science and growth of technology. Now, if you look into how time has shrank the innovations that took place in the last several centuries, Faraday took almost 50 years to invent electricity. Watson just took 20 years to get his genetic engineering DNA. And Iqbal just took 10 years to get logic circuit. And this is, again, I've taken it from some data. So computing power doubles every 12 months. Networking bandwidth doubles every 9 months. And storage hard disk doubles every 6 months. So look at the pace with which we are growing. Enormous pace, and look at the time domain that is shrinking from the time of Faraday to the time of logic circuit. More new information has been generated in the last 30 years than in the previous 5,000 years. You can imagine the kind of pace of development that has happened over the last. The scientific revolution has outpaced social revolution for over a century now. So there is total revolution in science, very little in social waves or society. And this obviously a big mismatch. You cannot go like that. Actually, you just cannot have this kind of disparity, this sort of difference in these two. And what happens as a result of this? The burning issues confronting the world today, environment, energy, environment, health, hazard, extinction, consumption, most importantly of growing inequality and knowledge divide, did not come into sharper focus soon enough. So look, we went through, but then all these factors that you see here, they actually were not addressed at all by the scientific community, and they just remained as such. So what is the paradox of our time? The paradox of our time is that despite very major advancements in science and technology, highly unprecedented economic progress, and improvement in the quality of life, there is a growing inequality. Knowledge divide. We have a knowledge divide. And we are living in a troubled world. And if you look into the galloping consumption, the consumption after consumption, we are eating, we are taking things, we are using materials, is depleting our resources. And of course, we are now living on a stressed planet. Now, this is what we are today because of all that we have been going through in the last several centuries. Look at India today, and you can see poverty per deprivation is giving rise to strife and conflict. The strife and conflict that we have today is actually nothing but as a result of the poverty and deprivation that we have. And you can see our cities, some way you have great achievement, development, and you see some other towns who are just in a shambles. Environmental pollution degradation is nothing but a direct impact of overconsumption, which leads to unsustainability. So you can see that we are consuming, and the consumption is leading to some of these problems, which are conflict, strife, and of course leading to unsustainability in whatever we do these days. And the affluent class is also leading to effluence. You can see the affluent class is doing this. So what can science do now? This is the question that we need to ask as a scientist as to what can we do. So in the 21st century, a more inclusive view of science has to be brought, because we cannot go on doing science like the way we have been doing all these years. So we need to understand, we need to change the course of science and look into all these aspects that we have been talking about. The conception that science is autonomous is unsustainable. We can no longer call us autonomous, that we are scientists, we will just keep doing, don't disturb us, we know what to do, and therefore it's not going to be sustainable. The autonomous nature of science cannot be sustained, and a new role of science has to be invented. The new role of science has to have networking with other knowledge streams, sustainable development, and this triangle has to be now maintained and built. So science needs to shed its splendid, because we live in isolation. And all of us think, oh, we are sitting in an ivory tower, we're discovering great things, which has no relation and no impact on surroundings around us. That's very, very kind of important to understand today. Now, science, societal engagement, and policy linkage is leading to innovation is what we need to look into it. And synergy between science and social progress is very important today. This is the most important juncture in the life of this planet, where science and society has to come together to decide as to how we look at this planet and how we want to make whole thing around this planet sustainable. Now, if you look into this, science benefits society, society supports science, science creates values, methods, products, society allows acceptability, equity, and sustenance. Very, very good. It is what is called cohabitation. This is not my word, it's a word which is generally globally accepted now. This kind of thing is a very, very important. Science society has to have a sort of a concept of cohabitation. Science, which is responsible, transparent, and understand the full implications of new discoveries in context of moral and ethical values and sustainability of our planet. Very important for us. Then society must shed its cynicism and skepticism about science and recognize its centrality for human good. See, we must look into a lot of things we look into, we are very cynical. Society also looks at science very sort of cynical. So this relationship between science and society actually has been historically not very productive and not very congenial, in other words. Now there is a time now to look and evaluate each other's attitude towards each other rather, and look into as to how we can create a network or which leading to a sustainable environment. Very, very important actually. Now Karl Marx says to assume one on the basis of life and a different basis for science is a priori of falsehood. Natural science will in time incorporate into itself the science of man. See, natural science is nothing but it has to incorporate the science of man. This is brilliantly said by Karl Marx. Just as the science of man will incorporate into itself natural science, there will be one science. Beautifully, said by Karl Marx. So science has to be a science of man, and of course science of man will incorporate itself into natural science. That's the kind of concept that came out by him many, many years ago. The scientists must ponder over their inability to transfer a sense of objectivity and responsibility that they so effectively deploy in scientific experiments and search for truth to the other side, namely society's evolution. Now what it means? It means that scientists should not think that they are not able to transfer the whatever objectivity and responsibility that they do towards their science. Can they now look for the truth that they're looking for? And the other side is the evolution of society. Society cannot be evolved unless you look into the same kind of commitment, same kind of perseverance, same kind of aim as you do in your experiment in the laboratory to look into the evolution of society. Because science cannot evolve independent of evolution of society. It's very, very important. So the focus is a new age science beyond discovery, addressing human needs and concerns. What are the human needs and concerns is where scientists and science has to now today look very, 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 very seriously. There are great opportunities. UN Millennium Development Goals says hunger, health, education, environment. We worked with them for some time, and there is very major focus on this. And of course, linkages with global change research programs, for instance, climate and energy issues. So you know, hunger, health, education, environment, climate change, these are the things that confront us today as those who live on this planet, those who want to make this planet sustainable. It's very, very important for us to look into these and then find what are the opportunities that exist for us, for younger people sitting in this audience. So what is the way forward? Centrality of societal engagement, policy intervention, and international partnership. Societal engagement, policy interventions, and international partnership is way forward. This is how science has to be done. Where society has to engage, there has to be policies that must intervene in the government policies, and there should be international partnerships. These are very important concepts that are coming up. Policy, not charity, will determine whether new technologies become a tool for human development everywhere and for all. I mean, it's not the charity, it's the policy that must be. As Mahatma Gandhi said, there's enough on this earth for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. So, I mean, we know that it's a need versus greed, whether you want to need or you want to have a greed. There's hardly any social problems on which science cannot make contribution by price in scientific state, and science for policy and policy for science. Science is never sufficient to solve the problem completely. It is, however, always necessary. So don't think that science can solve all the problems, but definitely a necessary tool for solving problems. Science cannot really take and say we'll solve everything, every problem on earth. Now this last aspect of look into poverty, which is one of the major challenges on this planet. Poverty is something that we need to look into. The market is a powerful engine of technological progress, no doubt. But it is not powerful enough to create and diffuse the technology needed to eradicate problems. See, you can create technologies, you can create novel things, novel tools, but you must stop and ask questions. Are we doing enough to eradicate poverty by this invention, by this technology? The answer is no. Because we all, in our own enthusiasm, think that whatever new invention, technology, or science we do, it will actually solve all the problems. Actually, it might solve the problem for a very limited people in society, but if you were to look into poverty, you need to stop and think what we do really is, or what we invented, or what we have invented as a technology, does it have any impact on solving the poverty? An answer, of course, will come very easily. So it has become abundantly clear and obvious that our technology has exceeded our humanity. We are developing technologies, but it has gone beyond that. It left the humanity behind. Look into the concerns of human beings. In our own desire to do things, we are still getting, gung-ho about inventions, innovations, without having any recourse to the welfare of our society or people. That's a very, very important concept. Policy intervention backed by political will and commitment can make a vital difference. See, you have to understand that policy interventions combined with political will has to be now looked into very, very seriously. Governments do something, scientists do something. There is nothing, no connectivity between the countries that have been run by their own whims and wishes. I think that time is over. We need to combine the policy interventions with a very strong political will to make a difference to the whole thing. The reality is, political will is a globalizing world is focused on security. See, this is the problem. We always like to look into security rather than development. Stronger in finance, we are very strong in finance and trade, but we don't look into environment. This is the irony of today's world. That you talk about globalizing the world, you talk about security, you talk about all kinds of things. Or on the other hand, you talk about finance and trade, you don't talk about environment. Now this is the reality across the world. And I think this is something that has to be very easily understood And what is the need? The need is address causes, not consequences. You see, all these are causes. But we need to look into consequences. For that, a political leadership that is scientifically informed and scientific leadership that is politically savvy is required. Look at this. This is where we, at ICSU, we evolved this sentence. We said political leadership that is scientifically informed has to be, and scientific leadership that is politically savvy is required. Scientists cannot say, oh, I don't care about politics. We have this notion among our, oh, I am doing my science, I'm in my lab, I don't care what goes on in the country. I think that notion has to be said, because you cannot divorce yourself from the reality in the world you live in the society you live in, the country you live in. It's very important for you to understand that you have a role. You have a role which has to be combined with the political leadership, and scientific leadership has to come together to understand, to solve the problems. And I think this is something has been one of the major drawbacks across the world in many countries. So now let's look into it. How do we solve? Science, society, policy, which will eradicate poverty, secure environment, and an inclusive world will come that will give to sustainable development and leading to a peaceful planet. That is how one should look at science, society, policy, will eradicate poverty, secure environment, an inclusive world, sustainable development, and peaceful planet. This is how one look at today as one of the solutions to this. And science is becoming a word system now. When you talk about science, also become a system now. It's no longer an isolated case of a discipline that's being pursued within the four walls of the lab. It also becomes a system like any other word system. And the context in the internal science is emergence of global scientific challenges, which says harmonizing challenges related to genetic research. This is important. Climate change, energy, environment, with the imperatives of galvanizing best science that can be adopted in vastly diverse geographic, social, economic, and political and cultural context. So essentially, the global scientific challenges have to be met collectively across the line, across the geographical boundaries, to look into this and address all these problems that you and I all know are there, but we do not have the means to look into it, because we do not have so-called that broader vision of collecting science, society, policy, science, and working together. I think this is where we need to have a global scientific challenges that we need to solve. And no one discipline, no single country can take complex global scientific problems. That's very simple, because don't think that we in India can do everything. We have limitations, so is America, so is England, so is Germany, so is France. So we need to understand the reality that exists among us or before us is that we can't, and no one discipline can solve, but collectively, yes, we can do. And Earth systems are more intricately coupled through complexity than has been generally recognized. And therefore, look into El Nino. El Nino happens in South Pacific, but you can see it creates communicable diseases in Bangladesh. Similarly, degradation of wetlands is connected to bird flu. Look at the kind of disconnect between and connect. Climate conditions help predict outbreak of malaria epidemics in Africa. And underwater volcanic eruption near Italy indicate lead contamination in Australia, in mines in Australia. So look at the kind of complex geographical things where something is happening in some part of the globe has a very direct impact on some very far off place on the globe. And these are challenges that we need to look into very, very. This is a nature paper that we saw. Now, natural hazards, tsunami, Katrina, Kashmir, you can see all this is happening here. Similarly, man-made hazards, deforestation, floods, all these you can see, all traffic, plane crash, mining, oil spills. If you look into this, we are doing it. We are responsible for it. And therefore, we need to look into this very, very carefully. The so-called global warming and climate change, we know already that we have kind of things which is really not very kind of. And you know about, I don't have to go about how this whole synergy works in this greenhouse effect, and this is one of those major things. And one of the most catastrophic loss of species, which caused 6 extinction costs, came in nature 100 to 10,000 times faster than normal. They're extinct. They're going away much faster than we thought. And this is something that we cannot afford as a globe, because they form part of our ecological system, very important for our own sustenance and survival. But let's look at this. What is happening is they are going much faster than the normal is. Human health and well-being, aging population, emerging epidemics is very important. I worked on this for many years, and we made a big report that I'm not going to talk about here, but this is one of the major things in this part of the world. And, like AIDS, neurological disorder, infectious diseases, AIDS alone is estimated to account loss of about 100,000 billion. So, what I'm trying to say is that these are problems that still are confronting us as a globe and as a country. But then, very little has been done by us to look into these things. So what should a consumer society do? Well, I'll not talk about much about it, but then, so what does sustainable manufacturing mean? You have to understand that sustainable manufacturing is very important now in the context of what I have said. Like, I don't know whether you can read it, but this I got from Sue, is using renewable materials that don't deplete the natural environment. Second is using fewer materials and inputs and materials that are non-hazardous or recycled. Third is, very important, that modifying production processes to use less energy, water and materials and to produce less waste. I don't know whether you can read it, but I'm just reading it for you. Using less packaging, lowering product weight, using more efficient transportation and logistics. And working with stakeholders like customers and retailers to reduce the environmental impact of sales and distribution, and expanding the life of the product, making easier to prepare and designing it to use fewer resources, and of course, designing your product to be reusable. So I'll tell you why I brought this. I brought this to emphasize upon one thing that people sitting here, researchers and young students, if you look into today, how much we waste in terms of making anything. When you do a chemical reaction, the byproducts you throw away. When a reaction does not work, you throw away. And today you have to look into is what happens to that which you throw away. Why do you throw away and where does it go? Because you are getting that material from somewhere, depleting the resources, you are throwing away into an environment without doing anything with that. So the question now is, what you have not been able to make and you got something, some junk or some byproduct, that should be the beginning for sustainability. This is where you begin from. Can I use that to convert that into something that will make whole life, planet sustainable? This is where we have to think. Because something that happens, no big deal. Everybody is a reaction of a chemical product is produced that you want. That is a good deal. Anybody can do it. But what is not formed and what other thing that you don't need is formed is where you need to begin the sustainability process and see how best that can be used to convert that into something more meaningful. Is where I think, in my opinion, especially for the chemistry people and chemical engineers, need to look into it very, very seriously about why a reaction has not taken place. If a reaction has not taken place, what has happened? What byproduct has formed? And can we look into that byproduct as the starting material for doing something else? So this is where I think that's why I brought this to you for looking into this. So an inclusive worldview perception that it's all about us must be discarded. It's about all of us. It's about all of us. It's not only that. And everyone has aspiration and everyone is vulnerable. In the 21st century, national interest and international partnership have to be viewed as complementary. So international and national interest and international has to come together as a complementary force for addressing the problems that we face today, especially in the era now. Sustainability. So it's a word of interdependence. Today you cannot say, I will remain in India and I'll just do my thing. That time is gone. You need to think across geographic boundaries, and you need to look into what other side is doing and how best 2 of you or 3 of you or 4 of you can come together, solve the problem. I think that's one of the very, very important things. When we started our research career about 40 years ago, I mean, I was in IIT Kanpur, and we just used to solve small puzzles, because that's the only thing we could do. But today, you have everything that is available at your disposal to do a high-quality research and technology. You have to solve the problem. You can't solve a puzzle. So we are travelers together on this bright blue ball in nothingness, as called by Carl Sandburg. And what is that we do to rejuvenate science? New learning systems, holistic knowledge, universal science technology literacy, reinventing science education, a scientific temper for the world, sustainability science for every citizen, a borderless view of science, and a human sensitivity index for every scientist. So we find that we need to have a human sensitivity index. We can no longer remain just a scientist and do what we want to do. We need to be humans and have a certain level of sensitivity towards what we do. And that's what kind of sustainability is about. I have taken a lot of materials for IQSU Science Plan, UNHD, IQSU office, Xiamen, China. This is where I spent a few weeks. Rio plus 20 IQSU Paris office. As IQSU head office is in Paris, Professor Mehta has contributed. Professor Nordin Hassan, Asia Science Society, Kuala Lumpur. All these basically have also contributed to my talk, because this is not an original talk by me, because I don't work in these areas. I happened to spend 7-8 years with IQSU in these areas, so I could get some information. And finally, I thank you for your time.
The floor is open for questions. Very excellent talk, Professor Iqbal. I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
So I have two quick questions. First, do you have any suggestions in terms of meeting the challenges what we have on air, water, and soil? There are a lot of changes going on. And second, as a scientist or academicians, what can we do to make it better at IISER Bhopal?
This morning I was talking to some of my chemistry colleagues. I think Nitin and all these were there, Manmohan. See, I was telling them something very different than many people may not like. I said, we as scientists in India have always done science which is done in West. America is. But science has no nationality. I don't say that we have Indian science and American science. I think science is global, will remain global. We, those of us who came and we were basically trying to keep pace with our Western counterparts to publish the same kind of work in the same journals, and that was very good. India is not America. And therefore, you need to understand that even though we do those world-class science, we need to look into what is required in this country. As a scientist, can I contribute? And this is where I think the science has to look into, and scientists who work in their labs have to look into, apart from what they do, for their own professional development and recognition globally. I have nothing against it, but I think a substantial part of that has to go now in looking into around you, and what you ask those three parameters need to look. For instance, I just gave an example to these people this morning that how do you cure people? You know, more than 50-60 people in rural area die of waterborne diseases. They just drink water and they die because of the fact that water that they drink is available to them in that form, which is full of all kind of microorganisms and other things. There is an effort to provide clean drinking water. What I'm saying is that is something that let them do. As a scientist, how can you solve this problem? And this is where the life sciences and material science people have to come together to look into this problem. Not by developing an antibacterial or antiviral, but looking at a very simple problem of how do you take care of the water that exists in those areas so that it becomes potable water. And this is something that is one thing. Environment, definitely. Now, environment, for instance, you know there's a lot of small molecules that hang around in the environment and that cause a lot of allergy. Has any organic chemist or any inorganic chemist or any material scientist has thought about it? Capturing it. It's nothing but molecular recognition. We always talk about molecular recognition, the level where we think we can do, but there are a lot of molecules floating around in this. Can we do that? I mean, these are some of the things that I'm talking about. I can be more specific in a little more one-on-one. Similarly, if you talk about the way we are using our resources to do science, we are actually spending or wasting almost 50 to 60% of material that is available to us for doing science. I may be very provocative, but I can justify and convince you that yes, indeed we are doing. We need to look into that. The kind of science that we do, especially I can talk about organic, I worked in the pharma industry and we know how pharma industry works, how much they really waste in terms of what they discover. In fact, they only 10% of their investment translate into something meaningful. 90% of the investment is wasted by materials and other things. So we need to change our thinking in science. Science cannot be done like this. Science has to be done in a way where you have to be aware of everything that you use in your laboratory in solving the problems around you. It's very important. In IISER Bhopal, I think I was telling you that while lunchtime, I think since you asked me about IISER Bhopal, I'll tell you. I was telling that you need to look into creating a center or a, whatever you call it, a department where you look into people who are hanging around in your neighborhood, who have a degree, and I can be more specific about chemistry, but have no skills. Today, we have a country which has degrees, but we have skillless people. You can actually impart skills there to make them employable. There's a lot of, I can confine myself to chemistry because I know of engineering and other things, but IT industry luckily has been very lucky because of the fact that there's a lot of body shopping there, so you just know computer and you're there. Whereas in other areas like chemistry for that matter, or in other areas like material science, in fact, you need to bring in people to skill them for solving smaller problems. And I already alluded to that. I don't want to bore people with all the details, but that I think, yes, there is a role that IISER Bhopal can play in actually imparting skills that would go a long way in creating a very, very valuable skilled person.
Any other question?
There's a question there.
Sir, you talk about the human sensitivity index. So, as in case of different people, like different people have different kind of jobs. Like for a sustainable nature, we all need scientists as well as the politician, as well as different kind of people who are actually participating in this nature. So, for a scientist view, if we set a paradox, so how this this index will help to make a kind of division or certain kind of rules in case of nature.
As a scientist, I can tell you, I think your question, you do science in your lab, you think you go and look into your experiments, do your experiments, report your experiments, teach your students, publish a paper, publish a PhD or whatever. I think majority of the scientists in our country or across the globe actually have that kind of viewpoint. When I talk about human sensitivity index, is nothing but how sensitive you are to what science you do for the benefit of others, the benefit of society. The level of your sensitivity is directly proportional to what you do in your science. If you say, I'm doing something which has nothing to do with my society, with my people, with Bhopal or around us, then I think your sensitivity is low. But you are saying, I'm doing something which actually has a direct relevance to people who live near somewhere in Bhopal, I think you are highly sensitive. That's what I meant.
Any other question? So if there are no other questions, let's thank Professor Iqbal for a thought-provoking talk. And before we end, I request Professor Sankaracharya to come on the stage and hand over a memento to Professor Iqbal. Thank you very much.